Well, we had so much fun with it last week, we have to do a Tuesday Power Rankings of the Pac-12. Is Washington still on top after winning by just 7 against Arizona?
You are Locked On Pac-12, your daily podcast on the Pac-12 Conference. It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On Pac-12. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and your number one source to stay up to date with our media rights and soon to be mostly team-free, but until then beloved and a loaded Conference of Champions. Like, comment, subscribe, rate, review. Please and thank you wherever you're listening to or watching this show, which today is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Well, I had a blast with it last week. The Pac-12 Power Rankings, Roman Tomashoff and I did it together. I'm starting with that. And then later in the show, what's the ceiling for 3 teams that I think are all capable of being over 500? If disaster were to strike, except for one of them, perhaps they wouldn't finish under, or they wouldn't finish over 500, though I suspect all of them will. Oregon State, Arizona, Colorado. Those are the teams of which I refer. So let's start with the Pac-12 Power Rankings, shall we? Let's start with looking at who's the best team in the Pac-12 right here, right now. Last week, my number one team power rated was indeed the Washington Huskies. And after a week in which they went to Arizona and didn't put the Wildcats away, but it also never felt like they were in danger of necessarily losing the football game. It came down to an onside kick at the end, but the Huskies were able to recover. I've still got Washington on top. There are a number of things that go into my power rankings here. And the first and perhaps most important thing is who has been the most impressive so far. This is also a reflection, as you will see later, of what you're capable of being the rest of the season and how good I think you can be, not just how good I think you are and how good you have shown yourselves to be right now. Interesting conversation you get into there with Utah that still doesn't have Cam Rising. But when I look at Washington's resume, I say that's the most impressive resume that I've seen so far. Because they have played everyone about as well as you can. And look, they're a fumble inside the 10-yard line away from probably covering the 17.5-point spread against Arizona. But Jeremy Bernard fumbles, Arizona recovers, Arizona goes down the field, ends up being a one-score game. So that's an instance of it looked a little bit closer than it was. But props to Arizona. Holding Washington to 31 points, that is no small feat. I have long stated that Arizona's defense is better than what it has been in the past and is a much improved unit. I think they really showed that on Saturday in front of a raucous home crowd in Tucson. And we'll be talking more about Arizona later. So Washington is still my number one. Penix is throwing the ball over the field. He's got 500 NFL receivers, I think last time I checked. And as we learned on Saturday, a couple of solid running backs as well. Dylan Johnson looks really, really good. So Washington. And by the way, the gap between the teams at the top, it's not significant. I'll let you know when I've seen a little bit of a drop-off. Number 2 is Oregon. And here come the homerism comments because I am an Oregon fan. Oregon went into Eugene, which is their, I phrased that wrong. Let's start over here. Went into the matchup with Colorado. And a narrative that I heard all the time from Colorado fans all across this great world of the internet was the Buffs are being disrespected, the Buffs are really good, the Buffs are this, the Buffs are that. And Oregon said, nah, you're not quite there yet. It's a nice story, but as Dan Lanning said, the Cinderella story is over. It's not entirely over. It's certainly not what it was at its peak right now after back-to-back losses, though Colorado, I think, is going to get back into it this week. They're my favorite Pac-12 prime pick of the week. How about that? I already have one of them, and it's actually the only one that I have. But Oregon still drubbed them 42-6, and the Ducks did not play well against Texas Tech. Were still able to win on the road in week 2. That is the biggest mark against them. It's the reason I have them below Washington, because I look at Washington's game at Arizona and Oregon's game at Texas Tech, and I think those are really similar games. They're road games against Power 5 teams that are solid but not great. And I say, well, neither team played that well, but also ended up winning. Good teams are able to win when they don't play well. I think those are your top two teams right now. Washington 1, Oregon number 2. Who gets power rated at number 3? Oh boy. I'm about to send Trojan fans into a tizzy once again, which I apparently have a propensity to do. Who's the power rated team at number 3, Spencer? That's Washington State. Yeah, I had Utah in this spot a week ago. I'll get to them in a moment. But I have Washington State at number 3. You know why? Because through 5 games, 4 for the Cougars, they have been the third most impressive team in the Pac-12. Cam Ward, here's a stat for you. Remember Cam Ward, the turnover-prone guy who occasionally made really good plays and had really good games and had down games as well? How many turnovers specifically, let's talk about the one that we focus on with quarterbacks. How many interceptions do you think Cameron Ward has right now? 0. He has 0 interceptions in 2023. Has not thrown one yet. He is sneakily playing at an insanely high level. He tore up a good Oregon State defense, which we saw on display on Friday night, albeit against a couple of backup quarterbacks. That's why I wasn't super high on the Beavs win, but it's certainly what they needed to do, and they deserve credit for it, and they had the most impactful win of the week, as I said. But Cameron Ward made them look like they were regressing back to 2018 or 2019 or 2021. He went for over 400. He was amazing. USC right now does not have a single top 25 win. So I power rate Washington State above them because what's the biggest factor going in here? Who's been the most impressive so far? Washington State, objectively speaking, has been more impressive than USC. You know why? Because they have a stronger resume than USC. The Cougars have a pair of top 20 wins. 2 of them. Heck, you can make the argument they should be higher on the list. The reason I don't have them higher is because they have to do it on the road. I need to see what they do against UCLA this week. They're a 3.5-point dog. Curious. Very, very curious. Washington State number 3. USC number 4. Look, the defense is just not very good. And there were a couple select USC fans who were not happy with me power rating them in this slot last week. I did not move them down. I'll explain why in just a moment. But the defense is clearly a concern. And I trust Washington State's offense, which has performed against a good defense. I trust USC's offense. And I think USC's offense has got better weapons top to bottom and a better play caller overall, though Ben Arbuckle's quite good, than Washington State. However, I have faith that Washington State's defense can come through in a big moment, and I can't say that about USC right now. The Trojans are allowing 34.5 points a game over their last 2 weeks, granted on the road, but to 2 teams who are going to have a combined record of under 500 this year. That is not good enough. That has not been impressive. USC is staying there at number 4 for me in the Pac-12 Power Rankings, because the Trojans still have Lincoln Riley, who I know can score a lot of points. They still have Caleb Williams, who's still insanely good. And they still have a bunch of weapons. I believe Zachariah Branch was absent on Saturday, and they still put up 48 points. That is what they are capable of all the time. And that's going to keep you very high and in the conference championship discussion. They will not reach their goals this season if the defense does not improve. And it's a narrative I think some USC fans are tired of hearing. Some USC fans have come at me and said, dude, thanks for ripping Alex Grinch. We're all tired of the guy. Well, yeah, it's kind of the same team that Lincoln Riley had back there in Lincoln. Or not Lincoln, Norman. Why did I say Lincoln? Oh, gosh, because his name's Lincoln. Oof, boy, little Freudian slip right there. But USC at number 4. How does everybody else shake out? Who's the next team? How far has Utah fallen? We got to answer these questions. One question I have for you is why haven't you checked out Game Time yet? That's the fast and easy way to buy tickets for every event you could want to go to. Sports, music, comedy, theater, everything you want. I saw this insane video of that new globe thing they built in Las Vegas. The Sphere, I think it is called. Holy smokes. You got to be able to get tickets to that sort of stuff. What if you want to do it at the last minute? Game Time allows you to do that. You can see the view from your seat before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. They have last minute ticket deals, flash deals, zone deals. Everything is available. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE. That's Locked On College for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Post second segment sip here. Knowing USC fans, the ones that listen to or watch the show as I do, I'm sure they won't be supremely happy with me today that they're power rated behind Washington State, but the Cougars have been more impressive through their 4 games than USC has at this point in the season. So the Trojans, big favorites once again against Arizona this week. So who's number 5? It's Oregon State. It's Oregon State, who went up to Pullman and lost to a team that is power rated ahead of them, as they should be. Washington State was the better team that day. Oregon State, however, had a nice bounce-back performance against Utah, who I have power rated at number 6. Now, these two teams are tricky, particularly Utah. Because remember the factors I talked about with the power ranking of what's going into this right now? Who's been the most impressive? And also, what do I think you are capable of? I do believe, as I will make the case later, Washington State is capable of being a 10-win team this year. I know, crazy, but that's the world that we're living in at the moment. I believe that Utah is capable of winning the Pac-12 this year. But guess what? Cam Rising needs to play. I mean, dude's got to get on the field. Because we saw on Friday night, Nate Johnson, Bryson Barnes. That's not going to be good enough. That is not going to be good enough. And look, I have Colorado power rated right below Utah because their offense with Shedeur Sanders a heck of a lot better by leaps and bounds than what the Utes can do with Nate Johnson and Bryson Barnes back there. The Buffs defense, however, has got a larger gap, or probably about as large of a gap, frankly. Utah and Colorado right now are, Utah is a better overall team. Like right now, could Colorado go into Baylor and win? Well, yeah, actually they might be able to. Baylor's pretty bad. But Utah has a great defense and a horrendous offense. Colorado has a good offense and a horrendous defense. And I trust Kyle Whittingham to, find a way to win those sorts of games. But this is a potential difference here. The potential ceiling for Utah is higher than that of Colorado, who I have power rated ahead of UCLA. You know why? Because I've been more impressed with Colorado than UCLA at this point in the season, and Colorado has played a tougher schedule than UCLA. The Bruins, my question for them coming into the year was, what's the quarterback situation going to be? Well, they've landed on true freshman Dante Moore. Okay, that's understandable. But guess what? He's not as good as Shedeur Sanders. And the offense for Colorado has looked better than that of UCLA for the most part. The Bruins are better at running the football. The Buffs are better at throwing the football. And UCLA has a much better defense. This is a ranking that can change. But guess what? Before the season started, I thought Colorado would go pull an upset against UCLA. I still think that. Right now. Biggest question in that game, just as a look ahead down the line, way down the line. Colorado's offensive line, bad. UCLA's front 4, very good. That's a tough matchup. But if they can overcome that, Colorado could win that game. Okay, so UCLA after Colorado. Then Arizona. Arizona did not impress me against Stanford. Goodness gracious, absolutely not. I thought played a great game against Mississippi State. I think they played a real solid game against Washington. I had them as a lean win team coming off that performance. I stand by that. Their defense is much improved. Their offense, when they get things rolling, they got real weapons. T-Mac and Montana Lamonius Craig and Jacob Cowing, McLaughlin, the tight end. I apologize if I'm pronouncing his name wrong, but they got dudes. Tetterell McMillan looks even better. He looks like he's bulked out a little bit, and he looks really, really good. Next year in the Big 12, he'll be one of the best receivers they've got. Cal is next, ASU 11, Stanford 12. I have ASU above Stanford there because ASU's defense is sneaky nice, as I talked about last week. Sneaky nice. Which is why I think it's such a small spread with Colorado this week. That discussion will come later in the show. All right, let's get to this. What is the ceiling for these three teams: Oregon State, Arizona, and Colorado. Two of these teams are capable, if things go wrong, of finishing under 500. One of those teams is not Oregon State. What a world to be in for the Beavs, where I don't feel it's possible for them to finish under 500, barring a slew of injuries at the quarterback position. But even then, I played with Ben Goldbranson last year. They went 6-1. So let's start with Oregon State. Sitting at 4-1 right now, number 15 in the country. They are at Cal this week as a 9.5-point favorite, a line that is highly intriguing. All 4 games in the Pac-12 this week are, of course, going to be the prime picks because I usually do 5 a week, and there are only 4 games. So, at Cal this week, UCLA at home, then a bye, at Arizona, at Colorado, Stanford at home, Washington at home, at Oregon. When I talk about ceiling, that is maximum potential. That is playing to your capability. That is things going your way and maybe getting a break or two in a game or two. Because oftentimes in the college football season, that's what you need to have happen. A kicker misses a kick, or a penalty is called in your favor, or a guy drops a pass, or a guy makes a play, or it comes down to a 4th down, go either way game. That's what I'm talking about here. These things go right. This is what I see as the ceiling right now. Coming into this year, I would have said the ceiling for Oregon State was 11-1. I think it's come down a touch with the Washington State loss to 10-2. Mostly just based on that result. I still think this is a good Oregon State team. DJ Uyungale's play over the last couple of weeks has concerned me. Against a good defense in Utah, didn't look great. Against a good defense in Washington State, came on at the end, but until then, didn't look great. Ended up completing 50% of his passes. He didn't play great against San Diego State when the Beavs won, but it was just kind of like, not the most inspiring effort offensively. So I think that's a drawback there. I still think they're better at that position than they were a season ago. And the Beavs last year went 9-3 in the regular season. I think their ceiling right now, 10-2. Let's go to Arizona. Arizona, who before the year began, I predicted as a 7-5 football team and pulling a couple of upsets. One of which, if Cam Rising just never returns, looks like it might be possible. That doesn't come till much later in the season, though. Much, much later. Second to last week in the regular season. Now, the last 2 performances for Arizona are confusing. They're highly confusing because you go to play Stanford, a team that lost to an FCS opponent on their home field. You go onto that same field and you win by 1 point. Riddle me that, Batman. Riddle me that. So, thus far, the Wildcats are negative 13 in the point differential department in road games. And granted, they've played UTEP and Northern Arizona, but they're plus 56 in point margin at home. And I just realized that I factored Washington in there incorrectly. So because Washington was indeed a home game over the weekend. So allow me to redo the math that I tabulated before coming on to do this segment here live on the fly. They're plus 35 against NAU. They're plus 21 against UTEP. That's plus 56. Minus 7 against Washington. They're plus 49 at home. And on the road, they have a point differential of minus 6 through 2 games. So they're reminding me a little bit of Oregon State. Different team at home than on the road. Maybe it's just hard to play at the farm. Oregon struggled out of the gate against Stanford to really get things going. Then they turned it on. Arizona never really turned it on. It was just a competitive game. Thankfully for them, they were able to win. Arizona's in the midst of a really tough stretch of football right now. They're in the midst of a really tough stretch. So they're sitting at 3-2. The Wildcats under Jed Fish are 3-2. Noah Fifita, I thought, did some nice things against Washington. Has looked pretty solid. Could very well be their guy of the future. I think Jaden DeLora has to come back if Arizona is going to hit this ceiling. And I stand by that their ceiling is 7-5. I was tempted to bring this down to 6-6, but as I mentioned earlier, I like what I'm seeing from them defensively, and that's been their drawback. If DeLora is able to come back, see, this is the, hypothetical, why we got to let things play out. The ceiling for Arizona, I think, is 7-5, which is my record prediction before the year. I would have said their ceiling prior to the season was 8-4, so it's come down maybe a little bit in that sense. But they're at 3-2, and here are the games remaining. At USC this week, tough. At Washington State, winnable, but really, really tough. Like more winnable than USC, perhaps. but really, really tough. Hosting Oregon State. That's an important game for Arizona. Hosting UCLA. Between Oregon State and UCLA, if Arizona is going to go 7-5, the way I predicted, they have to win one of those games. Oregon State, UCLA, got to win one. At Colorado, winnable, though not easy, because Colorado will be able to score points. Host Utah, go at Arizona State. Are there 4 wins on there? Maximum. I'd say maximum there are 4 wins. I think between Oregon State, UCLA, and Utah at home, best case scenario is getting 2. And then between Colorado and Washington State getting 1. And then winning at Arizona State. I think that's the best outcome for Arizona. I think bowl eligibility is possible. Certainly not easy for Jedd Fisch's unit. We got one more to talk about. I did not forget about Colorado. How can anyone forget about Colorado? That'd be like forgetting about Bird Dogs, which are just outstanding shorts for literally every occasion. They've got everything that you need covered, whether it's dates, evening out, pool, workout, lounging, work, golf, hike, fish. Do whatever you want in them. That's why they're so great. They do the exact same thing, Bird Dog shorts do, as Lululemon, but they fit way better. They fit better than regular shorts that are made of a stiff, restricting cotton. Bird Dogs fix this issue by inventing cloud knit fabric. They look good, they make you feel good, they fit slimmer through the thigh and leg, giving you a truly sculpted look. Go to birddogs.com/lockedoncollege or enter promo code LockedOnCollege at checkout for a free Bird Dogs water bottle with your order. That's birddogs.com/lockedoncollege for a free water bottle at checkout. You won't want to take your Bird Dogs off, we promise you. All right, now let's do Colorado. Let's do Colorado, and then I'll touch on Washington State here as well. Colorado is sitting at 3-2. They're at Arizona State this week. They're just a 4-point favorite. Excuse me. Have you seen Arizona? Have you seen the Sun Devils try to move the football? I'm sorry to Richie Bradshaw of Locked On Sun Devils, but have you seen them try to move the football? Now, the caveat there is, have you seen Colorado try to stop anyone from moving the football? It hasn't gone very well this season. Though they did it against Nebraska, and I think Arizona State is a lot closer to Nebraska than anybody else the Buffs have played. They have a really, really tough schedule. So, 3-2 right now. Their remaining 7 games. At Arizona State, Stanford, at UCLA, hosting Oregon State, hosting Arizona, at Washington State, at Utah. I think those last 2 games of the year are losses. At Washington State, at Utah. I think at Wazoo's maybe more of an upset. They're an upsettable game, but both those teams on their home fields, tough, and they're good football teams. That leaves the rest of the games. So they've got 7 remaining, and they've got Arizona, Oregon State, UCLA, Stanford, Arizona State. The best case scenario, is there a world in which everything could go right and you could win 5 more games? Yes, I believe there is. And that's a world in which you're able to thwart UCLA's front 4 with a quick passing game and move the football, or the offensive line improves. You lean on the home crowd to stifle DJ Uiagalelei in Oregon State. You do the same thing against Jaden DeLore or Noah Fafita against Arizona, which is at home. And those last 2 games of the year, probably losses. But the best case scenario, not my prediction, the best case scenario, the ceiling for Colorado when they play the way they're capable, which was pushing conference contender USC this past weekend at Boulder, is winning each of their next 5 games. I can see a world in which they win all of them. Do I think they will? Nope. I don't. Do I think they'll win at least 3 more? Yeah, I do. I think bowl eligibility is there. I think 6 wins is really likely here. I could see 5. I could see 7. I could see 8. Depends on how things play out. But they are not going to only win 1 more football game. For all the Colorado haters, I'm sorry. That's not going to happen. They are able to score too many points, and I think they're winning at Arizona State this week. And then they play Stanford at home. Like Stanford, Oregon State, Arizona at home. Colorado, if they play at their best, is capable of winning at least 2 of those games, Maybe 3, depending on if their defense can stop the run, which, yeah, I have my doubts. But that would be best case scenario. So the verdict there on their ceiling, 8-4. Washington State. Washington State's ceiling. At UCLA, Arizona at home, at Oregon, at ASU, Stanford, at Cal, Colorado, and at Washington. Ceiling verdict, 10-2. 10-2 between at Oregon and at Washington. Wazoo will lose at least one, maybe both of those games. Every other game, they're going to be favored or capable of winning. And I mean, they're a 4-0. Remember, Washington State hasn't lost this season. Big game this week against UCLA. We'll talk about that more as the week goes on. But interesting case study there. The ceiling for Oregon State, 10-2. Washington State, 10-2. Colorado, 8-4. Arizona, 7-5. Those are just interesting ones that I picked. That's why I chose them. So something else I choose every week is the Monday winners and losers segment, in which I assign to a fan base what I deem their mood should be. Win, outright winners, lean win, no vibe, lean lose, or losers. Right? It's like a scale of 1 to 5. Losers is a 1, winners is a 5. So a couple of you have raised objections as to my standard for that particular segment. Allow me to explain and clarify what I am doing there. It is not my assessment of what the fans are actually feeling for each particular team. It is my assessment of what I believe the fans should be feeling based on the performance they put on the field on Saturday compared to the expectations I had for them going into the game. The biggest controversy here amongst just a few people, but I'm sure others had this thought, and I see how you get to this point, was Oregon State. I had them in the no vibe department last week after a win over a top 10 team in Utah. The reason is because, number 1, I expected Oregon State to win. Number 2, they were at home. And number 3, the Utes are not even close to being the sort of team that actually warrants a top 10 ranking when they have Nate Johnson and Bryson Barnes in there. Now, Oregon State, to their credit, made them look like backup quarterbacks and made them come off of Nate Johnson. But when you're a good team and a Pac-12 contender, which I believe Oregon State is, that is exactly what you should do. I didn't expect them to go bonkers. I predicted Oregon State's point total right on the money, and I undersold what Utah's offense was going to be able to do. I thought they'd get 16 points or somewhere in that range. They only ended up with 7. But aesthetically, I never thought that Oregon State was going to lose the game. When I was watching it, it wasn't particularly pretty. Oregon State's offense wasn't able to do more than I expected them to. They did exactly what I expected them to. And defensively, they did exactly what I expected them to. And it was not a season-altering win. Right from the outset, it's, oh my gosh, they beat a top 10 Utah team. They were favored for a reason. They were favored for a reason, and they easily covered for a reason. It could have been a lean win, sure. But after the Washington State loss, it probably would have been a lean win if Washington State had been a win. Because now you'd be 2-0 with 2 ranked wins, and you would be affirming yourself as a college football playoff contender. But at this point in time, Oregon State is just trying to contend for the Pac-12 title, and they had to win that game to keep their season alive. And to me, it was a look of, exhale, sigh of relief, season has been saved. So that's my explanation there. If that's not clear, hit me up on Twitter at smalls_55. I can try to explain further. Let's close with this from Alec. Hey, Spencer, loved your commentary about the comments on College Game Day. Got a lot of positive feedback on that, which was good. That was an impassioned rant. Want to talk about the Oregon at Washington game some. Will the winner of this game be a top 4 team? This is October 14th, by the way, next Saturday. A top 4 team after, and how likely is it we see a rematch in the Pac-12 championship? If that is possible, love both Locked On Ducks and Locked On Pac-12. Keep up the good work. Appreciate you, first of all. Second of all, yes, a rematch is absolutely possible. They are my top 2 power-rated teams in the Pac-12 right now for a reason. If they play the way they're capable, yeah, I can see a world in which Washington maybe goes 11-1 and Oregon goes 11-1 and everybody else has got 2 conference losses. Yeah, I can see it. Hasn't been my prediction. I think cannibalization is imminent in this conference. But Oregon and Washington right now, they certainly have looked a lot better than Utah without Cam Rising. They've certainly looked better at this point than Oregon State, who went up to Washington State and allowed over 400 yards through the air. So is it possible? Yeah, it absolutely is. My prediction is not right 100% of the time, or else you would all be, filthy rich. Listen to my gambling picks, which I'm trying to get back over 500 on the year. One game under 500. We'll get there. We'll definitely get there. Coming off a winning week, feeling pretty good. And Washington should have covered. Anyway, so I think that for the Ducks and Huskies, the winner is almost certainly got to be in the top 4. Because who's got a better win? Like, who at that point in time will have had a better win? I haven't memorized everyone else's schedule, but I mean, Texas was vaulted into that discussion after win over Alabama. And Florida State was vaulted up there after win over LSU, which is, getting worse over time because LSU is a good but not great football team at this point in time. So hard to see how they wouldn't at least be in the top 5. Both are inside the top 10 right now. Washington is number 7. Oregon is number 8. I don't know how one of those teams doesn't get to go up a couple slots. So I think certainly they would at least be top 5, if not top 4. And yeah, a rematch is possible. Like, with the way Oregon and Washington have played so far, and they need to play higher level competition before, we know for sure what their ceilings are. And we'll have an idea when we watch each of them play and what the result of the game actually is. But if Oregon wins the game, for instance, but then Washington runs the table the rest of the way, and Washington hasn't lost since Arizona State of last year, by the way. They've won like 13 games in a row, so they know how to rack up wins. If that were to happen, then Washington would get into the Pac-12 title game, and Oregon could lose to a Utah, a USC, a Washington State, an Oregon State, and still get in along with Washington because they'd be a one-loss team. So if you get a pair of 8-1 teams in conference play, they can meet in the title game no matter who those two teams are. And there are certainly teams good enough to do that. It's just a matter of whether or not everyone else can play up to that sort of standard that I think Oregon and Washington have set right now. And USC and Washington State are kind of in that next tier. And Oregon State belongs in that mix as well. And Utah's the wild card. Utah's the wild card right now because at their best, yeah, they're really good and they can win the whole thing. But without Cam Rising, I mean, they look like the 7th or 8th best team in the Pac-12 because they just don't have enough offensive firepower. And although Oregon State has a good defense, guess what? So does Washington State. Oregon and Washington's defenses have looked good this year. USC's, of course, has not. UCLA's defense has looked good this year, and the Utes learned that. Like, you're not going to win a lot of Pac-12 games 14-7 the way they did against UCLA. So this is an awesome league to be able to cover. I love being able to do so right here on the show. Thanks so much for listening. Appreciate everyone. I'll see you next time, and until then, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.